In their heyday, Britain's railways were the envy of the world, carrying Victorian tourists, local produce, and vital supplies across the British Isles. But since their peak, nearly a third of the network has been abandoned. Now, 5,000 miles of lost tracks, spectacular architecture, and forgotten stories lie hidden, waiting to be explored. And there's no better way to discover them than from above. Aberystwyth, a beautiful seaside town in mid-Wales. In the Victorian era, the town boomed as middle and working class tourists flocked here to visit its beaches, pier, and castle. They arrived via train into the centre of town on a line that is still very much in use today. At its height, 3 different railway lines would use the station here. As well as the existing Cambrian line, there was the Vale of Rheidol Railway, which is now a heritage line, and the now abandoned Carmarthen Line, which we are going to follow from above. In one of the most ambitious railway projects of the Victorian age, a line was driven through the heart of West Wales.
It was so difficult to build because of its location, because the rock actually had to be cut out of it.
A line which helped feed the nation.
And there'd be one big milk train leaving Carmarthen, going down to London overnight.
Revolutionised the trade of Welsh wool.
You could find about 320 mills. The entire area was booming for textiles all through the Teifi Valley.
But not without its limitations.
You can only go a certain speed according to the condition of the route. There's uphill or downhill or round corners.
Closed over 50 years ago, its abandoned remains still stretch across some of Wales's most spectacular scenery, waiting to be rediscovered. Aberystwyth Station's grand classical style and ornate clock tower gives us a sense of how important the railways were to the town. The platforms would have thronged with holidaymakers, and its vast sidings packed with freight ready to be sent to South Wales and beyond. Just beyond the station is an old engine shed where trains would have been maintained. It's now owned and run by the heritage group Vale of Rheidol Railway, who have restored it and turned it into a railway museum. The Vale of Rheidol was a narrow gauge line that worked in conjunction with our abandoned Carmarthen Line. Their narrow gauge steam trains would bring goods down from the Cambrian mountains, and then they would be loaded onto the Carmarthen Line to be carried southwards. John Davies worked on both lines for many years, and this site holds lots of memories for him.
The Vale of Rheidol and the Carmarthen Line were unique, really. It was a way of life and work. It was relaxed to compare with mainline services. It was a country life, so it was a slower pace.
John started work on the railways in 1952.
First of all, we would start as an engine cleaner. There were 5 others here then as cleaners, and I was the oldest. I was 22. And there's one other still alive, and he was 86 this year. They were teenagers. And when you think about it now, you know, that sort of employment, deal with steam engines at the depot, and they were 16 years old.
With the foreman's approval, John was encouraged to train as a fitter, maintaining and repairing the trains. By 1953, he'd become a fireman, responsible for keeping the fire burning to provide the steam power. The steeper the hill, the harder the work.
He was busy for a fireman, yes. It was all this uphill, short uphills all the time. on the Carmarthen Line, of course, they're very severe gradients. 1 in 40, 1 in 50, 1 in 60s.
Steam trains had to weave their way around nature's obstacles and up and down the steep gradients safely.
Very few people realised that there was a speed limit on all railway lines throughout the British Isles. You can only go a certain speed according to the condition of the route. Whether it's uphill or downhill or round corners. They won't go around the corner like a car.
The railways have given John more than just memories.
I was with driver Edward Griffith Kenny, and we used to go to the refreshment rooms for a cup of tea. As we arrived there, he said, "Go to that office and make a date with that nice little girl in there." You know, stern, you know. I had to go. I couldn't say no to him. I went to the window office. I said, "I'm on rest day tomorrow. How about a date?" Yeah. This week, he'll be 66 years.
Staff and volunteers are hoping the site will be preserved for many more years to come as they continue the £2.2 million Wales to the World project. This will include a new platform, ticket office, and carriage storage shed, along with a museum and cafe. Taking to the skies to follow our abandoned line, we can see the platforms that trains would have left from, travelling along the tracks that still exist today. The Carmarthen Line started here at Aberystwyth and travelled around the impenetrable Cambrian mountains to Carmarthen. For over a century, this line was a vital link, allowing goods and products to be sent across the entire nation, connecting this region to the heartland of Wales and beyond. After pulling out of Aberystwyth Station, almost immediately the Carmarthen Line would have branched off the existing line through what is now a car park. Trains would have crossed over the River Rheidol on a bridge that has long since disappeared. Leaving the built-up area behind, the line's first obstacle simply cannot be missed. Pendinas is a dominating and ancient hill. Excavations have revealed that Pendinas may have been inhabited as far back as 700 BC, and that it was used as a hill fort during the Iron Age, some 3,000 years ago. Looking up, travellers on our line couldn't help but notice a strange chimney visible for miles around. It was built as a monument to the Duke of Wellington in the 1850s and takes the form of an upturned cannon. It is thought it was intended to carry a statue at the top of it, but this was never installed. Leaving the coast behind, our line pushes deeper into the Decaying countryside. It tracks the course of the River Ystwyth, from which Aberystwyth gets its name. The straight line of our railway alongside it, marked by trees, is clear to see. These flat valleys were perfect for railway building. In order to track as straight a path as possible, the railway had to cross the winding river multiple times. In places, the line was only a few feet above the level of the water. It was an engineering decision that saved some cash, but would prove problematic in years to come. 8 miles later, Trouscoed village comes into view. Now gone, the station was in the centre of the village, and the old track bed is now a road that still carves a clear path through the village. Passengers would have jumped on and off here at a small station with one fireplace and a staff of just 3. Despite its small size, this station would have seen some big names passing through it. Amongst the passengers were Kings Edward VII and VIII and Winston Churchill, who stayed at the Trouscoed mansion. The estate is recorded as being in existence as early as the 14th century. It suffered damage during the civil wars of the 1600s, and in the 1940s it was temporarily sold to the government for the war effort. Whilst this station was used by dignitaries and royalty, the next stop, 5 miles along the line, has a very different history. With a bird's eye view, we can see how the line curves southwards before arriving at the end of the dense tree line. An open space is revealed where once stood 2 platforms and a large goods shed. Walking past nowadays, people may not realise there was ever a railway line here. But from above, we can see the footprint of the station. And on the edge of the site, the white station master's house still provides a glimpse into the past. For over 100 years, West Wales was linked by a railway line, snaking its way from Aberystwyth to Carmarthen. It transported goods from this part of Wales southwards and carried millions of passengers along its scenic route. Our journey has taken us away from Aberystwyth and the coast and through the winding Ystwyth River Valley. Our next stop is Strata Florida Station, named after the tourist attraction just nearby, Strata Florida Abbey. During the Victorian era, it became one of the most popular in Wales, thanks to this railway line.
So this was a really sensational site for the Victorians. They could come here and see the ruins, but also learn about its history.
The abbey was built in 1164 by white-robed Cistercian monks, part of a movement that swept across Europe in the early Middle Ages.
This site would have looked relatively similar in the Victorian era, and it's interesting to see old photos and images of the archway where it looks very, very similar to what we see today. Some people have described Strata Florida as the Westminster Abbey of Wales due to its significance, and there were a number of very significant medieval manuscripts written here at the time.
An anchor of Welsh culture, it was a place of pilgrimage and held such importance that no fewer than 11 early Welsh princes are buried here.
This would have been an extremely grand building. We're in the Abbey Church at the moment, and although the walls are only very low level now, it would have been a full height building with arches and a lot of impressive stonework. This would have been used for services, and you would have had areas for the monks' choirs, and then we've got the smaller chapels at the back. But in addition to this, there would have been many other buildings around the site in connection with the abbey.
On the edge of the site lies one of the best surviving monuments.
The west door of the abbey. This would have been the entrance into the Abbey Church, and it's one of the most distinctive features of Strata Florida. It's quite an interesting piece architecturally because it combines typically Norman architecture and also these scrolls which are at the side, which is a more Celtic feature. It would all have been carved by hand, so it's quite unusual that this feature, which seems quite delicate in the detail of the carving, is the one that has survived, but it just shows how well built this structure was.
The grandeur of the building was matched by its importance, sitting at the heart of the country and revered by famous figures of the time. Yet it wasn't immune to the religious turbulence of the Tudors.
This site was destroyed in the 16th century. As part of the dissolution under Henry VIII, lots of abbeys across the UK were destroyed, and this is one of them. The abbey itself was then left in ruins for many hundreds of years, and lots of the stonework was then reused in the farms and buildings in the locality. You can see lots of that abbey stone being reused.
But it wasn't to be forgotten just yet. A new era in its history was on the horizon.
Stephen Williams was a railway engineer who came to the site in the late 1800s, and he started a programme to clear the site and then also undertake archaeological excavations. After Stephen Williams' initial excavations, it became quite a popular site nationally, so people would travel here from all across the UK to visit the site and enjoy the ruins. The opening of the railway, which runs relatively close to the site, would have been really good for bringing tourists up to the site. The closest station is actually in Ystrad, but it was renamed Strata Florida because of the popularity of this stop for people coming to the abbey itself.
The trains may no longer exist to carry hordes of passengers to marvel at this ancient site, but it still draws thousands of visitors each year. As well as attracting tourists, it's a popular site for archaeologists, as there's plenty more left to discover.
Excavations carry on. There's been excavations happening in recent years since the year 2000, and we now run an annual archaeology field school, so people come from all across the world to dig here. In the past few years, we've been excavating the courtyard between the later farm buildings of Strata Florida, and within that area there's lots of different features which we're trying to uncover the meaning of and how they were used.
Treasures uncovered reveal a fascinating glimpse of what the abbey may have looked like in its heyday.
These are some very distinctive tiles which would have covered the whole floor of the abbey, and some of them were exposed during the excavations by Stephen Williams, and others have been conserved and placed in this section. They show a lot of different designs, so some are nature-based, we've got oak leaves, others are more geometric, and we've even got one which we call the man with the mirror, and it looks like a lord looking at himself in a mirror, which is very interesting. We think that these tiles and these designs would have been used at other Cistercian sites across the UK. The Cistercians' overall attitude was towards simplicity, and they went for a much more basic approach, but the tiles themselves are fantastic and lots of colours, and it would have looked quite decorative as you walked in and would have been really impressive as you walked around.
Back at Strata Florida Station, we continue our journey, steaming across Cors Carron in a nearly straight line for 2 miles. Passengers travelling along this part of the line could easily have missed the ancient natural beauty hidden just the other side of the trees. This raised bog was formed over 12,000 years ago during the Ice Age and covers 3 square miles. In the Victorian era, this whole area was dug for peat to be burnt as fuel, with a railway providing access to markets. Today, it's a protected nature reserve and one of the few remaining examples of raised bogs left in the country. With Cors Carron behind us, the Carmarthen Line cuts a path through the fertile Teifi Valley. The small hedge dividing the fields is the only remaining indicator of how the line would have approached Tregaron, crossing the road and pulling into the ancient market town. Since the 13th century, livestock markets have been held in the town centre. Before the coming of the railway, huge numbers of cattle, sheep and geese would be herded from here by foot to markets in the southeast of England. With the arrival of the Carmarthen Line, they could be transported by train. After the hustle and bustle of Tregaron, our line continues southwards through the beautiful Teifi Valley. Although few traces are visible from the ground, from above, the railway's footprint can be seen punctuated by trees, hedges, and prominent embankments. One of the most obvious clues of a railway's past existence. As we cross the river, the embankments are abruptly interrupted by the flowing water. The bridges that once carried trains across this remote landscape long disappeared. These valleys may have been sparsely populated, but they were famous for their dairy herds, and they proved to be quite the money spinner for our line. Nestled in the middle of a woodland, a green covered structure can just be made out, sitting in a small patch of open space. Now abandoned, just like the railway line that would have served it. Passing alongside the building, as trains would have done, there are few clues as to the industry that once thrived here.
Wow. Well, there it is. It's 50 years of abandonment. It's rotting ruin, but it's still standing. and it looks incredible. This concrete monstrosity like an apocalyptic film set.
This was Pont Llanio Creamery. Originally just a small butter factory opened in the 1890s. This expanded site was built by the Milk Marketing Board in the 1930s and was operational for 40 years. Geraint Roberts has lived and breathed this line for decades, but has never visited this site before.
You would have thought the sidings would run in past the goods shed down there, down here towards the new farm building.
At its peak, 4,000 gallons of milk was being processed here each day.
It employed 120 people, and in the summer months, it was a 24-hour operation. So it would have been quite busy with that number of people in such a small community. They would be coming in from Tregaron and from Llandewi Brefi and from towards Lampeter.
As well as serving as a rail depot for the transfer of milk to London, the factory produced butter and powdered milk.
So I wonder if there was some sort of vent. There's a circular hole in the roof, which must have been a vent of some sort. So was this one of the areas where they developed? Because when you produce powdered milk, you need a drying room to dry the milk down. It's a very surreal experience being here. It really is. It's that combination of history and of nature taking over, reclaiming its territory, that has made it such a wonderful place to visit. It's an amazing relic of the lost line, and it's a sign of, sadly, of a past that's no longer with us.
But what remains can help provide an insight into the operations of this busy depot.
And that is the platform where they would deliver the milk. So this is like a cooperative. You have all the local dairy farms producing a certain amount of milk a day. They'll put it on churns, so when the milk churns are taken from the steps outside the farm, they're at this level. So they're rolled onto the truck. The truck would come down here, reverse on, and be rolled off onto here, and the milk would go into the factory, and the empties would be steam cleaned, and a load of empties would go back out with the truck back to the farms, and it would just go on day by day by day.
Each milk tank wagon had a capacity of 14,000 litres. This abandoned factory is a good reminder of how important our railway was to the local economies that it passed through.
That railway was very keen on developing things in its network, whereas the old factory never used the railway. This has been purpose-built to use the railway to transport milk and anything else that it produces down south to its markets. The passenger train would come down, it would reverse back into the sidings, pick up the tankers on the back, and it would go off to Carmarthen. And there'd be one big milk train leaving Carmarthen, going down to London overnight, and it would be what's known as an express freight. So it was only the top drivers who would be driving it. So it was very important. But for this community, this was essential because this is one of the few major industries in the area. All the mines had closed in Victorian times, and the only thing that would be on top of that would be perhaps transport of coal to Aberystwyth and Lampeter for consumption. So milk was essential for this line. It's just incredible. You can almost close your eyes and you can hear the trucks pulling up, and you can hear the clanking of all the churns and maybe the hum of the machinery that's going on, and the steam coming out of the air. It must have been pretty impressive, whereas now it's just a quiet ruin covered in greenery.
Following a strike by lorry drivers, the factory closed its doors in 1970. These imposing buildings remain as a monument to an industry that thrived in this region for so long. And as we travel further along the abandoned Carmarthen Line, there are plenty more long-forgotten industries to discover. "25 miles after leaving Aberystwyth, our abandoned line continues its journey southwards through the rolling Welsh countryside. From here, the landscape begins to open up and passengers were greeted with some of the most spectacular scenery of the entire journey. After leaving Aberystwyth, the line travelled alongside the River Ystwyth before stopping to pick up wealthy tourists from Strata Florida and milk for markets at Pont Llanio. Only a few miles further down the line, we reach Lampeter, home of St David's College, part of the University of Wales. It was the first university college founded in England and Wales since Oxford and Cambridge. Although the station is now gone, from above we can see the row of trees on the edge of the town that still mark the railway's old path. In the early 20th century, it would have served a local population of less than 2,000 people. And at the southeast of the town hides a remnant of the lost line. Once vital to trains crossing the River Teifi, it peeks out from among the trees. This railway bridge still spans the river 50 years after it was last used. Trains would have left Lampeter behind and continued a slow descent southwards towards Carmarthen. Navigating nature's obstacles, such as rolling hills, rivers and lakes, may have provided spectacular scenery, but it made this line painfully slow. 10 miles later, our train reaches Pencader. This tiny village was one of the most important stops on our route. Today, the massive yard, with the large building on its edge, gives us a clue as to the size of this station. The buildings were torn down in the 1970s, leaving a big empty space. But this once was a huge station that was the beating heart of the village. After leaving Pencader, passengers would once again be enjoying rolling green landscapes before being plunged into darkness. Now buried in the dense mass of trees, it's almost impossible to make out where the tunnel would have been. But eventually, a concrete clue emerges in the form of a vent. While little can be seen from above, on the ground and deep beneath the overgrowth hides the tunnel exit. Dylan Wilson Lewis has gained special access to explore the tunnel, something he's never done before.
Walking into the tunnel for the first time was an absolutely amazing experience. You can feel the presence of those Victorian engineers as you open the doors.
He's the vice chair of Llanpumsaint Cymru, who are campaigning to get trains running through this tunnel once more.
You can imagine those Victorian navvies hard at work excavating it. But the sheer scale of it is what surprised me.
Pencader Tunnel is the longest railway tunnel in West Wales, stretching for just over half a mile.
When you walk inside the tunnel, you get a personal connection with those engineers who actually built it. You've only got to touch the stone on the wall. You can actually envisage them being there. It took 7 years of hard work. 4 years to actually excavate the tunnel, and another 3 years to prepare the approaches to the tunnel on either side. It was so difficult to build because of its location, because the rock actually had to be cut out of it, to take the rock away from the tunnel and to excavate it entirely.
Luckily, some of the brightest engineering brains in Britain were on hand to help.
Several surveyors and engineers took a look at the site of the tunnel in terms of what sort of design it would take. Isambard Kingdom Brunel was one of them. What he decided to do was recommend a dead straight tunnel. Amazingly, they turned Brunel's proposal down.
A curving S-shape was decided upon instead, and construction began in 1857. But costs soon spiralled. Attempts were made to switch from broad gauge to narrow to save money, but this was rejected by Parliament. And things only got worse. 4 years into the build, the original contractor abandoned the project.
It must have been very hard work indeed, and the horses, they were the mechanised tools of the 1850s, 1860s. They died of disease due to the intensity of the labour. And at the top of the tunnel, there's a cemetery where they buried horses that were involved in the making of the tunnel.
As the line opened in 1864, the tunnel had been built, but the rock was still exposed and needed a brick lining. A watchman had to be employed to check for rockfalls. By the time the tunnel was completed, the company building it was almost bankrupt. But trains still ran through it for a century. Its closure had a huge impact on the local area.
When you see it, you realise that it was an act of industrial vandalism to actually close it.
But there is hope that trains will once again run through it, saving passengers from the current rail journey time of 7 hours. Llyn Cymru have been campaigning for this route to reopen for the last 10 years, alongside political parties in Wales. They are keen to reopen this line, reconnecting to Carmarthen and beyond.
As far as reopening the line is concerned, in 2016 a report was published which basically identified the tunnel as being stable. It would need basic work to get it up to scratch. It's there waiting for the next train, essentially. When the line is reopened, trains would run between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen in about 85 minutes, so the journey will be considerably quicker. When that first train leaves the station, all of us who have been part of Llyn Cymru and campaigning for the reopening of the line, it'll be the fulfilment of a lifetime ambition. It's not just about travelling between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen. It's about travelling from region to region, connecting people to Swansea, to Cardiff, to Reading, to London. It's about a much bigger picture than just the local transport in West Wales.
Emerging back into the light, we find ourselves in the deep, winding Gwili River Valley. The line is now heavily covered by trees, but slowly it emerges, and we start to make out the track bed. Trains travelling this part of our line became very accustomed to bridges. The winding Gwili River crossed under our line no less than 7 times within 2 miles of track. Today, all these bridges are abandoned relics. The thick tree growth means they can be more clearly glimpsed from above. Trains travelling to Carmarthen would not just have been carrying passengers or milk, but in this section of the line would have stopped to service an industry that called this valley home. An industry which was transformed by our line.
This area of Wales went through a massive boom in textiles in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You could find about 320 mills. The entire area was booming for textiles all through the Teifi Valley.
This mill has stood on this site for 180 years. It has been derelict since the 1980s, but Daniel Harris bought it in 2022 and has big plans for its renovation.
With all this stuff that we've got, I've always thought, well, what is the point in owning it all if people can't come and see it? You know, we have this incredible collection of working machinery, and weaving is not the easiest thing to get your head around, and yet it's something that we all interact with on a daily basis. Like, everything we wear or sit on is woven, everything. And obviously, the opportunity to preserve something like this is irresistible.
It has a long and illustrious history, which Daniel hopes to continue.
The original part of this building was built in about 1840, and it started off as basically a barn. It was a tannery. Then in about 1872, it got separated from the farm, and then various people took it over to try to run it as a mill until the Joneses came along and then successfully turned it into a mill. And now I've taken over. So we are going to do our best to completely restore the building. We have the largest collection of newly restored, commercially running heritage machinery, probably in the UK, if not potentially Europe. So we have looms dating from 1870s all the way up to nearly present, all running commercially, weaving different things.
All sorts of woolen goods were produced in this region, with one of the most distinctive being the Welsh blanket, known for its variety of unusual colours and patterns.
Weaving was such a huge part of Welsh heritage. It was such a localised, integral industry. It was completely different to the rest of the country. You would find a few large mills, but majority of them were kind of like this. And some of them were incredibly small, you know, just 1 or 2 looms, families connected to a farm. It was incredibly different. Whereas in Yorkshire or Lancashire, you'd have what's called a 1,000 loom shed, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a shed with 1,000 looms in. That just never really made it to Wales.
The producers may have been small scale, but there was a large amount of goods to ship out across the country and beyond.
The railway must have been particularly important because we've got evidence that a lot of larger things were shipped here by rail. So this is a bit of packaging that we kept from when we were clearing the place out. This is actually what a weaving reed would have arrived in from a company called Lunds of Bingley, which still exists today. And it was shipped entirely by British Railways northeastern region from there to the Elvet factory. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a date on it. So in 1947, we know that the entire product of this place was blankets, and their main customer was Morgan's of Swansea, and they would have been shipped from here by train up to Swansea. With the railway station literally just being at the end of the road, it would have been so much easier to take it by train.
But the railway hasn't only been useful for transportation.
We're currently in the 1930s part of the building, but where it joins on to the 1840s part, all the beams are actually railway track. So as you can see here, in the 30s part of the building, when they added it on, they used this railway track as an I-beam, and you find them throughout the entire site for different things.
Our line may no longer run through the area, but Daniel still has high hopes for drawing visitors here.
We're sort of building a textiles destination, so more or less for people who've got a distinct interest in textiles already, maybe want a bit more of an in-depth understanding or first-hand experience, and at the same time running a commercial operation rather than something which is just completely preserved and not fully functioning. I don't think I've ever had any remorse about moving to Wales and taking over the mill. It's amazing. It's just a very, very big project.
Visitors to this area will soon be able to enjoy stepping back in time and experiencing the mills of the past. But further along our line, there is already a way for people to experience the glory of railway days gone by. "10 miles from our final destination of Carmarthen, this abandoned line continues to snake its way alongside the Gwili River. For over a century, trains squeezed along the tiny wedge of flat land at the bottom of this valley. Our journey began in Aberystwyth, 40 miles north. We stopped to pick up tourists and milk before braving West Wales' longest tunnel at Pencader and the mills of the Gwili Valley. Passengers' journeys would have continued through the Gwili Valley, and our route can be made out from above on the right alongside the river. The close proximity to rivers is a characteristic of our line throughout its journey, helping it to navigate the rugged West Wales landscape. But that proved to be its ultimate undoing. In December 1964, the River Ystwyth flooded, washing away part of the line. Already under pressure from an increase in cars, the cost of rebuilding the line wasn't deemed worth it, and passenger services stopped just 2 months later. It was considered too expensive to repair and rebuild, so it was decided to close the line for good. But that's not where the story of our line ends, because the final stretch is actually no longer abandoned. In 1975, as our line was being rapidly pulled up, the Gwili Railway Preservation Society bought 8 miles of track bed. Today, steam trains still trundle towards Carmarthen along 4 miles of the original route on one of the country's most scenic heritage rail journeys.
We're known as the Friendly Railway, and I have to agree, the volunteers welcome you with open arms. They're very friendly, they're very caring, and they're very passionate about keeping the history of this railway open.
Following the Gwili River for 4 miles, passengers can enjoy picturesque scenery alongside a little something extra.
Today we've been serving cream teas, Welsh 11s, and we serve 3 trains on a Thursday. I've been serving cream teas on the train for 2 years now. There's about 8 volunteers, and we all come on a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Sunday, and we serve food every day on the trains as well. I originally came to light the train up for Christmas for them because they were short-staffed, and I've been here ever since volunteering.
Over 20,000 passengers a year come to enjoy this line, but it's not just for out-of-town tourists.
This line is very important to the locals in the area. It used to be the Aberystwyth to Carmarthen Line. Unfortunately, we can't get to Aberystwyth because we've got Victorian bridges stopping us, but the locals remember this line and they still come and travel on it to bring them back to their childhood experiences.
Like many heritage lines, the Gwili Railway Preservation Society has dreams of expanding their route.
Unfortunately, we don't own the line to Aberystwyth at the moment. Our next mission is to extend another 4.5 miles, but we would like to get as far as we can, opening the line back up as a heritage railway.
They hope to extend further back towards Aberystwyth, into the wild Welsh landscapes that we have travelled through. The line was closed to passenger trains in 1964, and the last freight train ran in 1973. But 2 years later, Gwili Railway Preservation Company was formed, and over the decades, more and more of the line has been restored. The heritage steam trains don't quite reach Carmarthen. They stop at Gwili Junction, less than 2 miles from the main line station in the town. Looking from above, we can see where it continued, past the heritage engine shed. This final part is now home to the Carmarthen bypass. With Aberystwyth 55 miles behind them, following what is now the roadway, passengers would have arrived into Carmarthen. On the final approach, trains would have crossed the Tawi River on a low bridge that's now gone. We can still get a sense of the route from above. Looking out of their window, passengers would have seen the road bridge that still exists. Trains would have then snuck under the bridge and slowly pulled into the station. From here, passengers could change onto express trains towards Cardiff and London, or local services toward the Welsh coast. Originally much larger to accommodate all the changing passengers, today only 2 of the 5 platforms that once operated remain. Our abandoned line was a route that transformed the area it passed through. It allowed generations of people to discover the wonder and beauty of Wales, and linked Welsh-made goods to markets across Britain and the world. Its closure severed a vital link that tied rural communities together and stalled the development of towns along its route. But if campaigners are successful, it may not be gone forever. While our journey comes to an end at Carmarthen Station, just like when our line ran, passengers can still catch trains here to South Wales and onwards towards London.